What's up, everybody? Thanks for joining us. I'm North Face athlete Griffin Post from Jackson, Wyoming. Got Nick McNutt and Angel Collinson with me today, and we're going to talk about our film Alaska.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Angel Collinson, and I am a professional big mountain skier. Psyched to be here with you guys today, chatting about all this. I'm based out of Salt Lake City, but currently I'm in Maine.
My name's Nick McNutt, and I live in Squamish, BC, Canada. Same thing, big mountain skier. I've been with the North Face for about 6 years. And I guess what we're here to talk to you about is our Alaska film from last spring. The three of us were up in Palmer, Alaska, kind of late March, early April. And we kind of hit a pretty good weather cycle, which is rare up there. We were lucky enough to have quite a few sunny days and good stability. And so it was a really successful trip. All of us have spent some time up there just kind of hanging out, waiting for the weather to change. So it was nice to finally feel like we kind of scored. Yeah, we were there for about 3 weeks, and we ended up skiing probably half of those days, which is pretty good luck as far as Alaska is concerned. So if you haven't seen the film, make sure to check it out after the live, and we're here to take your questions.
Yeah, I hope everybody's staying healthy and entertained at home. And yeah, again, this was an awesome project to be a part of. And you know, something we get a lot is like how we got into big mountain skiing. I know, Angel, you want to give some insight on your career path? I feel like we have very similar trajectories as far as ski racing, and then making that transition.
Yeah, I think I kind of got into almost accidentally, or at least as a profession accidentally. I was like Griffin, I grew up racing until I was like 19, so until I was pretty old, and well, it seemed old then anyways. And I went to college and just entered in some competitions like for fun, and so I started doing the big mountain skiing competition circuit and had a lot of luck there, and sort of got noticed by some of my sponsors that I have now, and it kind of quickly catapulted into getting a chance to film with TGR, which is like the dream. So yeah, psyched.
Yeah, I feel like I had a similar route, ski racing, then going. I went into skier cross for a while, and I remember I was like doing the skier cross circuit, and I was competing against Darren Ralves, and he was like just off the World Cup, and I watched one of his training runs, and he ran this like big turn, like just panel, and I was like, I was planning on going outside third, middle third, inside third, and I watched him go. I was like, well, I guess I'm not going to ever know how to do that, since he pretty much won the Hahnenkamm the year before or something. And so I started doing the big mountain contest, and it was a way better fit for me versus year crop.
Yeah, totally.
I have a different background. I kind of grew up, well, I raced until I was maybe 12 or so, but I got kind of bored of the structure and just started kind of free skiing and snowboarding and riding in the terrain park. I grew up riding some small resorts in the interior BC, and then after high school I moved to Whistler and kind of had my awakening as far as like riding the real mountains. Bigger terrain and stuff was immediately just like everywhere, and so I got super into skiing powder, and I had like the freestyle background with a little bit of race background, and I bought a snowmobile and linked up with some friends who did the same thing and had cameras, and we just kind of started filming. And after quite a few years of doing that, it kind of just fell into the right hands at TGR, and I've been shooting with those guys since then.
Well, you put together a freaking sick edit for the collab project.
Yeah.
It's like mind-blowing, and everybody knew after that, I think.
Ended up having some good luck with that. Just the right guys at TGR there noticed it, and it kind of snowballed from there, and I've been getting invited back since, fortunately.
As far as like advice goes, I feel like, Nick, you have such a different skiing style than like Angel and us, and like what would you say like somebody trying to get into big mountain skiing, like how do they I don't know, approach that or like get to the point where they can land switch and deep pow and ride away from it? I mean, I'd also like to know.
Well, I mean, the biggest thing, unfortunately, it's like you kind of do need to have that terrain. And so some people just don't really have that stuff at their local resort, but trying to get out into the bigger terrain you can find, and spending as much time as you can kind of challenging yourself and skiing steeper things and starting to hit bigger cliffs. And it's kind of like there's only one real way to learn, and it's kind of the hard way. I feel like we've all crashed a lot. We've all spent time taking our licks, and the bigger the terrain gets too, the more serious the consequences, obviously. And so there's times where you'll learn the hard way about like where the snow is going to be moving and where you shouldn't be. But first thing is to just challenge yourself at your local hill. Start like if you've kind of outgrown that terrain, then you might have to branch out and try and find some bigger stuff. But it's an exposure thing, like just as much time as you can spend doing it. Really, I used to ski the resort basically every single day that it was open, and did that for years and years before I started going into the backcountry more.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I kind of say the same things to people just skiing like every day. Like skiing Bluebird Pow is really not that hard. Like skiing in the rain and flat light where like nobody else is out there, like that's where you like learn how to be like the best skier that you can be, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because like the best days I think to train and to really like progress as a skier or as like a big mountain skier or any kind of backcountry skier is when the conditions are not that great. Like when it's like that light at the resort and it's hard pack, those are like the best training days because you go out, maybe you like hit some cliffs to hard pack, like, manageable. It's not going to like crush your knees or anything. But those days where you're like trying to push yourself when conditions are super subpar, I find are the days that really make it so when I show up and it's like good snow conditions or sunny, then it's like it just grows your capacity to like handle. And when the conditions are actually good, it's like, oh yeah, it's on. Like I know I can handle, this, like I know I can handle myself well in like being really challenged. And so I really, it's not always fun, but I try and usually like take advantage of those like crappy days, or at least have that mindset of like, well, at least I'm getting better.
Yeah, yeah. If you're crashing, it means you're learning, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We got some questions coming in, and I'm going to direct this one to Nick. What would you recommend for beginner backcountry trails in the BC region?
Well, I mean, I know around Whistler, there's a lot of good stuff. Most of the resorts in BC have a lot of good, like sort of ski touring off the resorts, which is a good place to start if you're new to it. And obviously it's really important to take some avalanche courses. And, if you're a little bit nervous, it's good to hire a guide and just sort of get a feel for the terrain, like with some professional supervision, and start to feel comfortable making decisions for yourself out there. But you want to take the right steps, to make sure you've got a good crew of friends to go with who know what they're doing. And it's something that, has serious consequences, but at the same time, it's really rewarding and fun to be kind of out there under your own power. But yeah, the resorts have a lot of good sort of access to the backcountry in BC. Like you can get the elevation with the chairlifts and kind of go out of bounds. Often like the mountain passes around BC too, the summits of the mountain passes will have parking lots where you can go touring from. But for Whistler specifically, like the musical bumps kind of singing pass area is pretty classic for beginner skiing. There's not a lot of complex terrain in that pocket. So it's a good spot to just go get some like cruisy pow and feel pretty safe about it. And even when it's like sort of bad weather, like tough visibility, there's a lot of trees and stuff there. So it can be a little bit better. But the stuff on Blackcomb ends up being a little bit more of high alpine, a little bit steeper and more complicated. Yeah, really like the mountain passes and outside of the resorts are your best bet for getting into it. But again, like having a guide or taking avalanche courses or both can be a really good way to get started.
Yeah, and I feel like those Avi courses too, you meet so many people that are on like your same kind of level, and
yeah,
totally. Like, it's like a built-in group of people to like tiptoe into the backcountry with and like start exploring from there.
Yeah, So hire a guy to do a course for you and your friend group, you know, so you're all doing it together, and like having a core group of friends that you go with that you really trust your life with is super crucial.
Yeah, for sure. And like having those friendships where you feel like open to talk and like say what you're feeling if you're like nervous about something, and it just breaks down that barrier that sometimes occurs with like a stranger in the backcountry.
Yeah. Right. What else we got here? What's your favorite place to eat in AK?
In Anchorage, F Street Station for sure. It's like this seafood, like kind of a little bit divey almost, but I pretty much start and end every trip to Alaska at F Street.
Classic.
So, classic. Angel, what about you? You've said, like,
I mean, I lived in Alaska for a couple of years, so I've got like a full list. But I mean, in Anchorage, there's the Bubbly Mermaid, which is like oysters and oyster shooters and all kinds of different champagne. So that's pretty rad. I also, oh man, there's a bunch of different ones. There's like Anchorage actually has like a pretty bomb food scene with like a lot of different stuff popping up all over. Let's see, there's this pizza place called, oh, I'm going to mess it up. There's a couple really good pizza and like brewery joints in Anchorage. And then there's this really cute spot along the Turnagain Arm if you're driving to Girdwood where Alyeska Ski Resort is. They're like a halfway along the drive from Anchorage to Girdwood. There's a stop called Froth and Forage that have like locally, I think it's like locals that have caught reindeer and like local farms. They basically just have like a lot of local like animal and plant produce. And in Girdwood, oh, I know all of them because I lived there for 2 years and it's not very big. They're actually all pretty good. There's like only 5 of them and I recommend them all. Jack Sprat's a classic.
Nice.
We got another question. How do you guys stay confident at the top of a scary line? Griff?
So this might sound really counterintuitive, but at the top, like 5 minutes before I drop, I try to imagine everything that could go wrong, like every possible scenario, because you know, the first time you think of something going wrong is when it's actually happening. It's probably too late. So once I have like a game plan for, you know, every constituency, then I'm like, all right, let's go back to like plan A, and whether it be plan B, C, D, or E that actually plays out, like I've gone through that in my head mentally, and I'm like, I feel prepared for it at least. So I'm never in the situation where like something, or hopefully never in the situation where something that I didn't anticipate at all happens.
Yeah, totally. I'm with you, Griff. I like think of the worst case scenarios first. And I run through all of those. And also if I'm like, yeah, I run through like the likelihood of the different worst cases happening. And like, usually I'm not standing on top of something that I'm not really, really confident in, because usually by that point I've made the choice to ski something different or easier. So usually by the time I'm at the top of a line, I'm already confident that I can ski it. And if it's at the edge of my ability, I'm like, one of my favorite tools is I like to look at the, like down the ridge at all of you guys. Actually, I like to
Nice.
Take a moment and like see where everybody is at and like see how we're just like teeny little specks on the ridges. And for me, it just represents like this, it brings me into my body and into like just having better awareness of all the sensations, and like when I'm going down the run, when I take the time to look at where everybody is, and especially at you guys like on the ridge, I just have better reactions. And it's like just getting that little scale put into place of like, we're tiny little human specks in this vast ocean of mountains is like, anyways, that's like one of my tricks for some random reason.
Yeah, having like your islands of safety too kind of mapped out, like knowing, you know, if something were to happen or if you're not feeling it suddenly partway down, like having those couple spots on your line where you know you can stop, you know, and like fully kind of reset and reassess. Like, you know, we're out there trying to film for ski movies and try and make like, you know, high action stuff skiing as well as we can. But like, there's certain times when it's just not worth it. Like you'll get partway down some line and you'll just like decide like this shot's not worth what I'm doing here, and I just want to stop and reassess. So knowing that you've got a couple places where you can really shut it down and reset kind of, and I mean, worst case, you can hike back up, or that also gives you some confidence, I find, when you're, you know, facing these like long runs that are pretty complicated, like having a couple spots mapped out that are your sort of ripcords is nice to have in the back of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like the thing that people don't see is like the way we look at the lines will like land pretty much across the valley from them, and you kind of pick out where you want to go, and you're like, yeah, this totally makes sense. And there's a lot of like, oh, how big do you think that cliff is? And it's like a total guess. And then you get up to the top and like, hopefully you can kind of see down and like see where you're going to go. But a lot of times you're just like up there. It's just like this big rollover, and you're like, And then you, like to Angel's point, you look down the ridge and you see your buddy, and you're like, wow, they're looking pretty tiny down there. Like maybe that feature is a little bit bigger than I thought it was. And, you know, just having that ability to like, you know where you are during a line and like just keep on track based on like the features that you saw from the opposite angle that might look completely different when you're on top of them.
Yeah, that kind of, there's like two things that made me think of, and one is like just the amount of time that we spend at the bottom of the runs, like looking at them and planning them out and taking photos and looking through binoculars. Like, I mean, how much time would you guys say percentage wise we spend at the bottom, like looking at the lines, it like in contrast to like the entire day of filming? I feel like it's like 70% of our time is spent just like studying the stuff.
I mean, we definitely like, we spend a lot of time too on Google Earth or looking at like photos that we've got done like, on a recon flight or something, and really mapping it out like kind of in theory. And then once we're actually there looking at it in person, it's another whole like, you know, often it might be like half an hour of just like mapping out a run or something. And, you know, just for something that takes only maybe 30 seconds or a minute to ski down, like just to sit and look at it for half an hour or an hour feels like a lot of preparation, but it's kind of what's necessary when they're really complicated. And, you know, you're kind of hanging it out there sometimes, looking at different places where the snow could be falling. And if you fall with it, like it's exposed, or yeah, I think it's a pretty good percentage of the time, probably like 3/4 of the time we're out there, we're just like planning specifics of a run, it feels like.
Yeah, for sure. And just bouncing ideas off each other. And it's like you have 3 or 4 sets of eyes on the same line discussing it and trying to figure out like, you know, what the slough's going to do and like what snow quality is going to be like on different parts of the run. And just having that like group resource is so key to, you know, making the best decisions.
I don't know if you guys remember this, but there was, so Todd Jones is one of the founders of Teton Gravity Research, and he told me, I think it was him recently, just like this past year, because now we have like digital cameras and phones that we use to take photos from the bottom of our runs, like, you know, of our planned line. And when you get to the top, it looks so different. And like Griffin said, a lot of times, like you can't even see anything. And you're like, that little bump that's like, you know, 200 feet down the hill, is that the tip of the nose of that big cliff that I was going to go right up? Or everything's kind of like spaced differently than you think, and it just looks weird, and sometimes there's blind rollovers. And, you know, I totally rely for the most part on having my, you know, that image at the top. It brings me a lot of confidence, and totally. It's a skill you practice of like knowing where you are in time and space when you're skiing, of this photo of the face that you've kind of memorized. But I was like, how did like Coombs and how did those guys do it back in the day when they didn't have this technology to be able to see? And so I think Todd told me that they use Polaroids.
Yeah. And I mean, even with a Polaroid, like it's so nice being able to like zoom in on our photos and like get in such detail. Like just having one Polaroid would be like, okay, I think I got it.
There's no Google Earth either.
Yeah.
Just doing a recon flight, and then whatever pictures they had, that's what they had. So we're pretty lucky. We have some tools that are like helping us, you know, in the modern world to do this. But it's you know, anyone can do this stuff like at their local resort just with an iPhone, and picking something that they haven't skied before if they want to look at it from below first or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of respect for those pioneers back in the day. Looks like we got a question for Angel coming in. What's your favorite area or run at Snowbird?
Ooh, well, I have a lot of them. I would definitely say I'm totally biased, but it also is my favorite mountain to ski. Well, yeah, and Alta. But I think if I had to pick runs at Snowbird, it depends on the conditions. But if it's like hard pack and it hasn't snowed in a long time, I love Silver Fox. But if it's like a pow day, I really love like Great Scott or Hanging Bull or Tower 3.
Yeah, I feel like I lived at Snowbird for like 4 years as well, and couldn't agree more. I feel like chalky, like chalky Silver Fox, just super wind buffed. It's like always good.
Yeah, it's always good, even when everything is bad. Yeah, that's why I love those resorts so much. It seems like that always stays good. There's always one thing you can ski where you're like, yes.
Another question. What equipment are you using while skiing in AK, and how is it different than the equipment I'm using at my local hill? I know that I'm using the same setup that I would use normally. The only difference is that I spend a lot of the winter in BC riding on like a touring setup, because even if I'm snowmobiling or riding the resort, often I'll go for like quick little tour. And in Alaska, if you're not touring, it's nice to have like a race boot, like a World Cup race boot, just nice and stiff. I think we're all on that kind of program. And then just like a full metal, like high din binding, 16 or 18 din, just bulletproof. But skis, and as far as like all the rest of our equipment, like all of our packs and outerwear and goggles and everything, it's the same as you would be using.
Yeah, for sure. I'd say like in Jackson, pretty much skiing with a backpack, Abbey gear, beacon, probe, and shovel every day, and it doesn't change too much up in Alaska, except I guess maybe our radio setup is a little different than if I was just skiing with my friends, just because there's so much going on when we're out there filming, and being able to like communication is so key, and having very like a pretty detailed communication methods is really crucial. A lot of shots have been missed just because somebody's mistaken go for no, or vice versa.
Yeah, and being able to talk to the helicopter too. It's like it takes a special radio. You're not just using like a walkie-talkie like you might use with your friends in the backcountry. It's a little bit more elaborate, but yeah, the communication is super important. I guess we're wearing harnesses too in Alaska often, because it's pretty crevassed terrain, lots of glaciers and stuff. Even when you're just kind of hanging out on what seems like a mellow glacier, like having a harness on with a little bit of crevasse rescue equipment. And sometimes we'll have an ice screw on us or whatever. So if like we get into some steep terrain that we don't like the snow quality and it gets too icy or something, you've got like a way to attach yourself back to the mountain while you transition to hike back out or whatever. That's pretty much the only extra thing I feel like we're riding with is a harness with like pretty minimal crevasse rescue gear.
Yeah, I think, and like I'm always riding, like in Alaska, I feel like I'm always riding a ski that's like 112 waist, and in the resorts I might like vary it up a little bit, but I kind of have like my going, which it was a vocal confession, but it's changed up now, and kind of in the process of like selecting what my new gonna be. I don't know if you guys a lot, but I kind of find I have like my favorite pair, and like the skis that I ski on in Alaska are the same ones that I ski on at the resort. I just a little higher when I'm up in Alaska.
Yeah, me too. It's funny how you get like attached to like one pair of skis, and I'll like pretty much ski them into the ground. Like once I get my like the ones I like, it's just hard to change it up.
Yeah, the last thing you want to do is have like a brand new pair of skis you've never ridden like on top of one of these runs. I think you want to be super familiar with the equipment, and make it feel like it's part of your body.
Totally. All right, another question. Best time of year for filming in AK?
It's got to be spring.
Yeah, I got to go.
March to mid-April, I think, is probably the time to go. That's, you know, the days are pretty short before that, and that's kind of the fattest snowpack of the year. And a lot of the stuff we like to ski is pretty north facing, so much earlier in the season than that, there's no sun on any of it, so it's a lot harder to ski in the shade when there's a lot of complexities and like the terrain's really uneven and stuff. Like having some shadows and everything is really important for us. So that's kind of the window. But after that, it gets a little warm.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like, as you said, that north facing stuff, it's just getting light. You know, it's hard to, you don't really see it in the film, but a lot of times we're skiing stuff at like after 7 p.m. or like before 8 a.m. So it's like really on the edges of the days where like the northwest stuff is getting light or the northeast stuff is getting light. And it's such a like different, I guess, feeling than the resort, just because you're going so late at night and like you're like, wow, I should be having dinner, and you're like standing on top of some kind of puckering line, and yeah, it's just like a different energy than like the day-to-day skiing throughout the rest of the winter.
Yeah. Well, if it's in the sun in the middle of the day, we're not skiing on it because it's going to be just like melt freeze crossed, or, you know, like kind of too south facing. Even stuff that's pretty east or west facing, if it's in the middle of the day sun, it's usually kind of cooked by the time we're up there skiing in spring. So late and early in the day.
I mean, Angel, you guys had some decent luck filming like January though as well, right? When you were living in Alaska.
Yeah. Yeah, that was like, it was different because we went with a totally different approach. Everything in January, none of the north facing stuff gets light. So we were trying to go for the south facing stuff, which is like, you know, when we go up to Alaska in like March, April, the south facing stuff is just like baked and cooked and like rock solid in the morning and like totally slush in the afternoon. But in January you can ski it, and it was really cool because, you know, the sun comes up at like 10:30 or 11, and then it sets at like 4. So, but the whole time in between is like magical pink, purple, orange, like just perfect light to film. But your windows to work are really short, and also then it starts warming up kind of in February, so it's a short window to try and catch the south facing stuff.
Yeah, but you have like the magic hour all day, so you're like, it's gorgeous out, like should be filming everything.
Yeah, totally. But you wake up at like 6 or 5 to start skinning in, and it's dark for like 4 or 5 hours, and you're like, oh, what's happening? This is weird. It's 9 o'clock and still dark, kind of.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, it was a really cool trip doing that. But yeah, I mean, the best time, like you guys said, is totally like mid-March to mid-April, I would say.
Sweet.
One Griff. What does the planning process look like for finding lines in AK? I feel like you probably do a little bit more detective work than most.
Oh, you should see my Google Earth. I have like pin marks like everywhere and like every different range in Alaska. And a lot of it, it's like, it's like this guess, you know, you look for obviously like north facing terrain, but also has to be heavily glaciated. And I don't know, I have this whole theory, if anybody out there watching is get a GIS about like where these particular mountains exist based on a few key factors. And so I'm not sure if it works, but I've noticed this like very similar, like proximity to ocean, a lot of ice around, bigger peaks nearby, and pretty much focus on like those areas. And then once you find like the mountains, then you start like looking at logistics, which is just a monster to take on. But that's the good thing about Alaska. Like if you're motivated, like there's usually a bush pilot or some operator that's willing to outfit you and, you know, make that kind of pipe dream happen.
Whether or not you want them to be your pilot, though, is another question.
It's true. This is true. There's a lot of crazy people out there, but, you know, most of them are, you know, the good type of crazy, the fun crazy.
Totally.
How often is it storming that you get? And how many bluebird days do we get?
I mean, you guys have been part of some serious beatdowns as far as like waiting for bluebird weather, so I'll let you guys give some perspective on this.
Well, Sage always said if you're skiing 50% of the time that you're up in Alaska, you're crushing it. Like that's like kind of on the like very high end of doing very good. So I would say usually it's Bluebird like maybe 20% of the time. What would you say, Nick?
Yeah, I feel like the last couple trips I did up there with you, we skied a lot less than this one. Like this was about half of the days, or maybe even a little more than half, were skiable,
Mm-hmm.
which felt like almost too many. Like I remember on like day 7 in a row or whatever, we were or 6 or 7 in a row, we were kind of waiting for it to start storming so we could have some rest. We were kind of like, our minds were just fried, you know, from looking at all this crazy terrain and trying to wrap our heads around it.
Yeah.
And I feel like the other trips, it was almost the opposite problem. Like we just were stir crazy, you know, like especially when you're camping, you're just trying to kill time basically, or, you know, try and like set up some games or something, or read or whatever it is. And yeah, so I'd say like between 20 and 50% of the time is probably like your average trip. 50%, like Angel said, would be like on the high end and feels like full success. Like you're not going to go up there and ski every day for 3 weeks straight. That's just like not going to happen. And you might go up there and ski once or twice in 3 weeks, which I've done before too, which is pretty frustrating, but it's just the nature of those mountains. You know, they're so close to the ocean and they just have such a huge relief, and they're glaciated. And so it's like a stormy time of year typically, you know, in the spring. So you're trying to get like the few sunny days right after a big storm cycle, which is a gamble to go sit there and wait for the storm to be over.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that makes me think of I've thought of you guys a lot like during this quarantine because I guess Griffin, we haven't spent a ton of time weathering out intense together, but you know, I think as a professional or as like a mountain athlete, we've all spent a lot of time like sitting around intense, not able to leave and just like waiting for the weather to be over. And so I'm for example, to anyone who's watching right now, like one of the things that we do to kill time is we play a lot of this dice game Farkle, and it's like become this whole thing on our trips. It's like now it's like everyone's got the scorecards, and it's like we've killed so much time playing these games, and it's almost like not a relief to have this downtime, but at least for me personally, it's like kind of nice to have time away from when it's like game on to like rest and recover, maybe to plan your line. And I've kind of thought about moving forward out of COVID that it kind of feels like I'm weathered in a tent right now waiting for the storm to pass. And so I've been thinking of like all my experiences, yeah, like with you guys in the mountains. And is there anything that you guys have been or like I guess how's your experience been, and what have been your takeaways that you've learned like from your time waiting out the like weather windows, and is there anything you guys have picked up or done, or you know, is your Catan game going strong, or like what have you been up to?
I'm a big time gardener now, and so I know this doesn't really apply to Alaska and spending down days, but I've definitely been growing a lot of plants, and it's way more like cathartic and like involved than I thought it would be. And I made a bunch of like random friends on Instagram that I would like never have connected with otherwise. There's this one like 70-year-old woman that like her and I chat back and forth a bit, and you know, she gives me tips because she's been growing plants in Wyoming forever. And so it's been like super funny to just connect with like really random people. And like, it's definitely helped, you know, make it a little less lonely, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like down days in Alaska are definitely good practice for being quarantined. Like it's a lot of similarities, you know, except for you have like maybe the freedom of being in your own house, and, you know, lots of cooking. And I was also like, I had a broken arm this last couple months. I got injured just before everything kind of shut down, right at the start of March. And so I was kind of going to be in this boat either way. And I've been hurt before. And so it's, you know, really similar to being injured, where you're kind of just like limited in what you can do, but you try to just, you know, kill the time in a positive way. And whether that's like taking up a new skill or home improvements or just more time in the kitchen than usual or whatever it is. Like I'll often like play guitar or something on these trips, and with the broken arm, I wasn't really able to do that either. So I had to kind of just, you know, do home improvement basically was all I could do with one arm, which went way slower than it otherwise would have. So it ended up killing way more time than maybe it would have. Yeah, I haven't really been doing too much else other than, you know, going on walks and started running and stuff a little bit. Like we're allowed out of our houses here. But yeah, we haven't been doing a ton. It's been kind of like being in Alaska in a storm.
Sweet. So next project. I mean, I think we've all had plenty of time to, you know, look to what's on the horizon. You guys got anything you're looking forward to?
Well, we did another TGR film this winter, so that'll be getting released later on in the fall. It's like an annual thing, so there's a bunch of those films. If you want to look up in the archives, you can see what we've been up to the past years. But there's another one coming up in September, and it's still kind of a question mark, I guess, how that'll be released. And our typical thing is to go to, you know, film premieres at movie theaters and stuff and music venues. And so in September, who knows what that'll look like? Maybe it'll be drive-in theaters only or something. So we're not too sure exactly. But that was like my focus this winter, was filming with those guys again. And unfortunately didn't get up to Alaska. None of us did, but we had some luck just skiing around at home, I think. So.
Yeah, I was coming back from a knee injury last year, so I don't really have, I might have a piece with the TGR movie, but I may not. We'll see how it goes. And I guess what I'm working on next winter is mostly going to be a social-based project, but I want to travel around to little mom and pop ski resorts in a van. And so I'm just looking to like meet up with people along the way, or if you guys want to like DM me really cool little tiny resorts that could use some love or that you love, I'm open to all that. So I'm kind of building this out now, and it'll just be like live along the way stuff. So that's kind of what I have going right now. Besides, well, I bought a sailboat and I'm going to learn how to sail and start sailing around the world, but that's for another year. So, yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I've spent the last like month or so just looking way closer to home and what's in the backyard. And I've spent so much time like traveling to these far-flung places that I've overlooked like some pretty sweet spots in Wyoming and eastern Idaho. So I have a tick list of stuff that I can get to in like a day trip from my house, and just start to kind of poke out to these zones that, you know, just overlooked for so long that seem just as worthy as, you know, anywhere else. So it'd be nice to get or just check out a little bit more of Wyoming that I've not been to.
Cool.
Well, exploration will probably be the name of the game, it looks like, for a while.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, I know. We'll see if the van thing happens.
Sweet.
Out of time here.
Yeah, well, thanks everybody for tuning in, and you can definitely check out the Alaska film via the link in North Face's Instagram profile. And yeah, any closing remarks, guys?
Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, totally. I know. I always get so. Oh,
Stay
sorry.
healthy out there, and yeah, getting outside hopefully a little bit. Some fresh air is always good.
Totally. Yeah, thanks everyone who watched it. It was awesome seeing your guys' faces from afar.
I know, it's been so long. Glad to see everybody's healthy and well.